RYUC After Action Report Essential: Limitations of the Human Perception. This recording is part of a series of recordings reporting on an exploration into our creativity, collectively entitled Releasing Your Unlimited Creativity After Action Report, abbreviated RYUC-AAR. This particular recording addresses the creativity essential on the limitation of the human perception. Background on the Creativity Essentials and the RYUC material. The Creativity Essentials are concepts, principles, ideas, or whatever one may wish to call them, related to the source out of which our creativity arises. The journey of exploration into our creativity revealed the essentials needed to be addressed and understood in some way by an individual if one desired to move as deep as possible into their own creativity, creative ability, and creative power in this incarnation. Otherwise, one would be placing self-imposed limits on their creativity. Essentials are not building blocks or fundamental items used to create something. Rather, the essentials are about the stuff out of which the building blocks and foundational items arise. It is suggested you ponder, contemplate, do your own experiments with the creativity essentials such that you know their truth for yourself. Here I wish to bring to your attention we each have a very unique perspective of creation. What I say and write about on the topic of creativity with its relationship with the creative essence of creation are my comments based on my observation and experience from the journey of exploration into our creativity. If what I say resonates with you, use it. Otherwise, it's recommended you do your own contemplation, experiments, and exploration into the variety of topics discussed here to see what's true for yourself. Conditions giving rise to the limitations of the human perspective. Relative to the exploration into the depth and breadth of our creative power and creative ability, one of the major realizations in the journey of exploration into our creativity is creation with a capital C. Both the seen and unseen universe does not work the way our human mind thinks it works. The human mind is brilliant at figuring out aspects of creation. For reasons discussed here and other Releasing Your Unlimited Creativity After Action Report recordings, the human mind is incapable of fully and accurately understanding how creation with a capital C works. If we wish to access the depth and breadth of our creative ability and creative power available to us, we are all faced with needing to become aware of the limitations of the human mind to understand how the limitations impact our creativity and how to work around the limitations. This is especially true relative to the non-physical phenomena and the unseen, and dealing with the unknown, which includes our understanding of the creative essence of creation, which gave rise to creation. One goal of the journey of exploration into our creativity, based on the observations being made in the journey, was to attempt to synthesize all that was observed on the journey and information on reported human experiences outside the journey into a coherent understanding and paradigm of our creativity and creation. The desire was to look to see if there was a paradigm that could incorporate all the types and kinds of experiences individuals reported as being possible and true as the individuals reported they had experienced. Such an understanding and paradigm was found, but had one significant potential flaw or issue. The observed flaw is part of the reason why the human mind is incapable of fully and accurately understanding how creation works. The observed flaw was that the understanding and paradigm reported in the Releasing Your Unlimited Creativity materials was my unique perspective of creation. But this flaw or issue is true for any understanding or paradigm of creation, for all paradigms and understandings are created by the unique perception of an individual or individuals. It's just that other individuals buy into or accept the unique perception of that other who created the paradigm or the understanding. The limitations of the human perspective relative to our creative power and creative ability arises from several issues. The primary issue already stated centers around the fact that each human has a unique individual subjective perception of creation. The second issue is this unique perspective of creation is coupled with the fact every human mind starts with zero understanding and information about the world in which it finds itself. The human mind must experience and learn all that the mind comes to know and understand during its lifetime to live in the world. A third issue is the human mind, no matter how brilliant it may be, holds only a small fraction of all that is possible to know and of what to be aware. In essence, our mind has a limited mental storage ability and limited awareness. The limited mental storage ability and limited awareness, in turn, limits our ability to see and understand the wholeness and interconnectedness across all of creation. One may see parts of the whole and glimmers of something larger, but we are unable to see the whole picture. Here the recommendation is, rather than holding to a fixed perception of creation, be open to possibilities never conceived. In addition to our unique perception of creation, there is the issue, as a human being, our human mind starts with zero information and knowledge. One result of the limitations of the human mind starting from zero knowledge is we each need to look to others for information we cannot obtain ourselves. Additionally, we do not have the time nor do we have the resources to obtain all the information we may need by ourselves. Human learning. Relative to our human mind starting with no knowledge, as we grow up, we gain knowledge through one of three sources of information that becomes available to our human mind as we go through life. The first source of information is our own personal subjective experiences of life. We experience something and no one can dispute our personal subjective experiences, nor can they dispute our subjective perception and our mind's interpretation of what we experience. The second source of information is all the information that is given to us by the world in which we grow up and what we are told about life and how the world and creation works. This information is given to us from some external source like our caregivers, teachers, elders, spiritual or social authorities, friends, and the like. Additionally, much of the information given to us has not been personally experienced by the other individuals giving us the information. Rather, the information has been passed to them from some other. This second source of information means much of what we believe is based upon what others have told us. What we have been told may be true for the one telling us and their unique perception, and they feel it works for them. However, what they tell us may or may not be true for our unique perception and what we in our own uniqueness may need to be here to do. What works for any other may not work for us or resonate with our truth. Here we need to understand whatever we see from any other is also the result of their unique perception or reported to them by another's unique perception, no matter what the claim relative to the validity of the source. Everything created by humans is the result of a unique subjective perception of another. The question is, what do we retain and use and make a part of ourselves? Here we need to eat and digest all that comes from outside of us, much like we do any food we eat. We keep what serves us and discard the remainder. Relative to the information we receive, we need to keep what resonates with our truth and discard the remainder. Regardless of the source of information, we tend to use what is effective in our life. We believe a lot of things that we never verify and never check out. We just accept them. But much of what we believe doesn't really make a big impact on our life. Or they only make a big impact in our life in a certain time. If they appear effective at such times, we retain the belief and continue to use them. How we live our life and when we learn to make decisions for ourselves, how we choose really boils down to what is effective. If we get what we want and we move through life, we continue to use what we know. When we don't get what we want, we try and figure out how to get what we want and look to change what we believe is necessary to get what we want. We listen to others or do our own experiments to figure out what works. The bottom line here is we all take in information from outside, assimilate it, and with our personal subjective internal and external experiences, and use what is effective for us. But that does not mean all the information that we take in and we assimilate and how we interpret the experiences we have are necessarily correct and correspond to the way creation really works. The simplest example I usually give is observing the sunrise and sunset. We believe and think the sun rises and sets, and we use it very effectively in our life every day. But in reality, the sun does not rise or set, and the earth rotates. But knowing the earth rotates usually is not that important to us. Just using the sunrise and sunset is more than effective for most of what we want to do in life. The problem is there are things in our life that we may be choosing to create where analogously, Those subtleties of where the earth rotates versus the sun rising and sun setting have a tremendous impact on what we're trying to create. What we are trying to bring here is attention to the fact we need to begin to understand is what we use and is effective in our life, but it is not necessarily true. We will find there are times where we have to go back and look at our assumptions about what is true for things that we wish to create in areas where maybe we are not being totally served by the way we are living our life, what we are trying to do, and what we think and believe. The third source of information may or may not be available to us and is related to the information we carry into life. Now, one may say they have had pre-life memories or channeled information or divine information of some type. That may be true, and one cannot dispute the unique subjective experience and perception of any other. However, all information which is communicated by any human is filtered through the filter of the past experiences of the individual communicating the information has had in their life, and that filter through which the information is communicated more often than not contains elements of information from personal experience of information given to them by another. The problem we face with each of these three sources is that our human mind biases and filters any observation and experience we have based on our unique subjective perception and the past experiences our mind has had accumulated as a human being in this life. Here it is important to understand it does not matter what we may remember about any existence or entities existing outside our current physical incarnation, or non-physical experiences within our current physical incarnation. Anything communicated is filtered by our current human mind and what we have experienced and come to believe in this life. If we do not have the minimum set of physical experiences to understand the experience, what is communicated will be incorrect in some way. Or if we have inadequate experiences or inadequate beliefs, we will probably erroneously characterize the experience. Additionally, anything communicated to us by any other is the way their unique perception is characterizing what is communicated and may or may not be accurate. Rather, it is ultimately only their unique perception. We need to realize that anything communicated by a human has been filtered by the human mind and the experiences that mind has personally had in its current lifetime, including its learned information from such activities as in school or told by another, that have not been directly experienced. The bias also includes any understanding or experiences the awareness within the individual has that can transcend physical creation. The awareness may have a valid perception outside physical creation, but the information reported is still filtered by the human mind and the experiences of that human mind in this current lifetime. This is one reason individuals know things or have experiences, but they cannot communicate what they experience. This is because their human mind does not have the experiences to understand what is experienced in a way that can be effectively communicated. The new, never-before-experienced original creation. Relative to the limitation of the human perception, there is the unknown, and the issue that we have when faced with a new, original, never-before-experienced creation. Our mind has great difficulty dealing with a truly new original creation, for mind only knows the past. For a new original, never-before-experienced creation, mind has not yet experienced the new original creation to know what it should look like. Mind has no way of knowing what to either do to create the new original creation or what it will look like, for mind has never experienced the new original creation. Mind may perceive the possibility of a particular new original creation existing, but since the new original creation has never been experienced, mind does not know exactly what it will look like. Mind may perceive attributes of the new original creation, but it will be unable to know what the new original creation looks like. This issue greatly influences and limits our creativity until we become aware of these issues and understand their implications. That is, until we become aware of how to deal with the unknown for a new, original, never-before-experienced creation. A good example of a new, original, never-before-experienced creation is the commercial product WD-40. WD-40 is a lubricant, and the name WD-40 is actually water displacement number 40. Here we have an individual who had the thought, which was, can something be created which will displace water? The idea that arose in the mind had a single attribute of displacing water. However, the mind had no idea of what this water-displacing material looked like. It took at least 39 experiments for the mind to come to understand the formula or combination of materials that would create a water displacement material. Now, it needs to be pointed out there may be many other materials that can displace water similar to WD-40, but they are unknown until somebody experiments and sees if other materials can be found. The issue here is true for any truly new, original, creative endeavor, and our mind does not have the experience to know what it looks like. But this is also true for any experience we have that is new, never before experienced, and original. We may see or understand the attributes, but not understand what the experience really looks like. For any experience we have, whether it be a truly new, original, creative endeavor, or simply something existing that we never previously experienced, our mind will not understand it until it obtains the minimum set of experiences to understand it. But this also means there are things we think that we understand, but we truly don't fully understand, because mind characterizes the experience based on its past and thinks it understands the experience. The mind then believes itself and the improper characterization. As such, we never see reality for what reality really is. Man keeps projecting the past. Projecting the past into the unknown calls into question all that we experience, whether it is something we personally experience or something told to us by another. Similarly, I think the experiences of Jill Bolte Taylor in her discussion on the effects of the stroke in her left brain says it nicely. If I understand her correctly, while her left brain ceased to function until the blood clot was removed, she was completely aware of what resided in her right brain, including the awareness of being an unbounded energy permeating all of reality. But nothing could be communicated until her left brain linear thinking came back online. Alternatively said, she had volumes of information and experiences, but could not bring them into a form to communicate till the left brain and its human experience in physical creation was available to communicate it. That is, we need the minimum set of experiences to be able to talk about any other experience we have to accurately describe the experience, and part of the function of our left brain is to access those past experiences we have. Here, the important point is, without the prior experience in some way, we cannot communicate what we are actually experiencing. Often we communicate through analogies or similes. For example, we may say, the pain felt like I was pricked by a pin, or the joy was just bubbling up inside of me. Neither of these descriptions are accurate. Rather, they are just the best the mind can do to create in its attempt to communicate what it experienced. Here, it is also important to realize that everything created by humans goes back to a unique perception an individual had of themselves and creation, and to the single thought and experience of that person giving rise to the thought residing and unfolding in the creation developed by the humans. Adding to this understanding the realization that anything that was not created by what we would call God or not created by nature was created by a human being, and whatever has been created by humans started as a single thought within the mind of an incredibly unique subjective perception of an individual. All of it. This means every spiritual or religious belief, any social custom or way of being, any form of government, any scientific principle, any medical or healing practice. It does not matter what it is. It started as a thought in a unique subjective mind of an individual. When communicated, others simply accept that thought and build or acted on that thought, and before we realize it, we have manifested all that humans have brought into existence. Yet it all started from a single thought within the mind of a single subjective individual. To say a single thought can change the world is not an understatement. A single thought has changed the world we experience repeatedly. If we take what an individual says and it works for us, we say it's true and or expand upon their thought. It is ultimately their thought and their perception that we make our own. For example, you and another individual could be standing at a river. The individual says, I wonder if we could build a bridge here. You say, interesting idea. Then both contemplate it, and with some passion and energy behind that thought, a bridge is built. This is true for everything. This includes every spiritual tradition, every scientific tradition, every piece of music, art, or written book, or all economic system, all government system, and anything you can name created by humans. It all starts with a single thought within an individual. The valid question that can be asked is, given the subjectivity and uniqueness of our individual perceptions and the limitations of the human mind, how can anyone accept the reliability of the observations, findings, and conclusions of the author's journey as recorded here if there is the possibility his perceptions is simply his illusion and has nothing to do with a generic truth, especially with another's personal truth, and what the author reports is limited in that he individually and subjectively perceive. For physical phenomena, all can observe and agree with the results. However, for non-physical phenomena and experiences, we do not really know if what the individual perceives is only their perception. The only answer that can really be offered to answer this question is, does what is said to you and you are being asked to believe really resonate with your truth? This is why the reader and listener is always encouraged to take and eat and digest all that is said, keeping what serves you and resonates with your truth, and discard the remainder. And, of course, you can always do your own experiments to prove or disprove anything that is said. Here I need to bring your attention to the fact we each have a very unique perspective of creation. What I say and write about on the topic of our creativity with its relationship with the creative essence of creation are my comments based on my observation and experiences from the journey of exploration into our creativity. If what I say resonates with you, use it. Otherwise, it is recommended you do your own contemplations, experiments, and explorations into the variety of topics discussed here to see what is true for you. Given the potential inaccuracies where in any perception we have or made by any other, several considerations are provided here. One consideration is it does not really matter what you believe as long as what you believe is effective in your life and what you want to create and experience. In essence, allowing effectiveness to be your measure of truth. Just realize any other may or may not agree with you in terms of what you think and believe. In saying that it does not matter what you believe, it is highly recommended you learn to follow your internal guidance, which will show you itself as a feeling, for it will guide you to what you incarnated to do. What you believe about why you are here and what creation is all about is not important. What is important is you do what you came to do, and that is determined through feeling. A second consideration is allow yourself to challenge yourself to see or imagine another way for whatever you believe is true. Be open to consider, could what you believe is true and correct be perceived in another way? Be open to the possibility whatever you perceive may be in error in some way, or there is simply another way to describe the same thing, for we do not always know what is unfolding. Consider the following story as an example of creation offering other options. The story goes as follows about not really knowing what the next instant will bring. All we can really do is be in the moment and be free to move with whatever arises. The old story is about a Chinese farmer who has a son and a horse. One day the farmer's horse ran away, and all the neighbors were trying to commiserate the farmer on how unfortunate a circumstance it was that his horse ran away. The old farmer just said, could be good, could be bad. The next day the horse came home with 4 mares following it. All the neighbors were rejoicing at the farmer's unexpected wealth, whereas the farmer said, could be good, could be bad. The next day the farmer's son, while trying to ride one of the new mares, was kicked and his leg was broken. All the neighbors began to again commiserate with such an unfortunate circumstance. The old farmer replied, could be good, could be bad. The next day the commanding general of the local army came into the village and took all the young able-bodied men. They were all drafted into the army and marched off to fight the war, except, of course, the farmer's son whose leg was broken. Rejoicing, with obvious mixed feelings about the farmer's son being the only son remaining in the village, villagers congratulated the farmer on his good fortune. The farmer, of course, replied, could be good, could be bad. So it is too with us. We really don't know what the next moment will bring, and we do not always know the truth and accuracy of the information we have. We just need to be open that we may not know what we think we know. Experiencing creation with our unique subjective perception. Here it needs to be noted there are physical phenomena, there are non-physical phenomena, and there are unseen phenomena, and the unseen phenomena may be physical, non-physical, or a combination of both physical and unseen. A good example of this is the electromagnetic spectrum. The visible light is a small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, and the visible portion of the spectrum is visible to us. It is physical. We can measure it. We can do things with it and manipulate it. Then there is the part of the electromagnetic spectrum that is unseen, but it's physical. With instrumentation, we can detect and use the unseen aspects of the electromagnetic spectrum through the physical detection devices that we develop. Then there are phenomena where there is the unseen that has a physical component. For example, an event occurs and you can have an emotional response to something. The emotional response is not physical, but the response will cause or lead to physiological changes that can be measured with proper instrumentation. But the emotional response itself is non-physical, and it will be different depending upon how the individual thinks and perceives what is being experienced. The emotional response itself is not something we can put in a box and measure in the sense we can with a purely physical phenomenon. Then there is the realm of what people would consider as spirit or entities or existence that is not physical and will not necessarily give us any kind of a physical phenomena that we can actually measure. Individuals have tried to look at these non-physical and unseen phenomena and tried to explain them in a variety of ways. But the problem with the unseen is the non-physical unseen is that we really don't know what we are seeing. We can give explanations, and if our explanations seem to be effective in addressing or dealing with the unseen phenomena, we believe our explanation. This gets us into all of the religious, spiritual, and metaphysical rituals and attempts to control and manipulate the unseen world based on what we have come to think and believe. If what we do appears effective in our life, we use it. Processing physical experiences. When dealing with the physical world, gaining information from any source, we can always go back and look for physical phenomena that give rise to the information. We can repeat the observation by performing an experiment. We can then know without a doubt that our perception is reasonably accurate. Additionally, although we each have a subjective perception, we can have reasonable agreement with others on physical phenomena and what occurs. This particular fact has been the whole basis and success of the physical sciences. That is, the phenomena is observed, the observation is documented in such a way that another can follow the same procedure and get the same results. Additionally, the process can be varied to see what changes and what maybe even come to understand why the observation changes. How the reproducible results are interpreted is another question. Physics for years observed reproducible phenomena which were interpreted one way and now have been explained with a completely different explanation, more encompassing than the past explanation. There is agreement about the observed phenomena, but the interpretation is different. In physical sciences, experiments build on previously reproducible experiments. Interpretations tend to be replaced with later experiments, which provide clarifying and more expansive observations requiring replacement of previous interpretations. Processing non-physical experiences. However, for anything that is unseen that doesn't really have a physical component, it's very hard to substantiate what is being seen and perceived by the unique perception of the individual, and to know for certain that any other is experiencing something similar, let alone perceiving the same thing. We may seem to communicate in a way that makes us think we are experiencing the same thing, but we don't really know. We must often assume we do. For non-physical phenomena, such as religious, spiritual, and metaphysical practices, individuals have a subjective experience, and then they explain to others however they acted to have the experience. However, another cannot prove or disprove what the individual experienced. This is one of the problems with many mystical experiences. The mystic interprets and explains their experience through their subjective mind based upon what the mystic thinks and believes. It was their subjective experience. However, if the individual followed a precise religious, spiritual, or metaphysical practice, and that practice is attributed to produce some effect, another can do the same practice. This other individual, too, can report an effect. The assumption is the effect experience by both individuals are the same because they use the same practice. However, even though the experience is a non-physical experience and a subjective experience, we assume the two individuals who use the same practice experienced the same or very similar experiences, but one cannot be sure, for they are non-physical and subjective. With a physical experience, the results can be observed to be the same for physical experiences and verified. But for non-physical experiences, all one can say is there has been an experience, and the experience can be described as being the same, but that doesn't necessarily mean they are truly the same. Also, there are assumptions in the words that are used to describe the experience that may sound the same but are different. The same words can have different inflections or different perceived meanings, such that one person may describe the experience using a particular word, and the other person says, "Yeah, that's right." But there is the assumption that the individuals are using the words in the same way, but that is not necessarily true. The point here is when it comes to non-physical experiences that are described by the human mind through the interpretation of the mind's past experiences, we cannot really be sure that two individuals will describe the experience in the same way. We don't really know if the person is having a similar experience because each of the individuals are uniquely different. Each of us have a unique, different body and a unique, different perception. This problem is compounded if the first individual tells a second individual to do things and then explains to the second individual what they will experience. The second individual then does what they are told and they have the experience. The second individual, of course, will usually report and integrate with the explanation as told. This is different than two individuals doing the same thing and recording and reporting what they experience separately and independently, then comparing with each other what each experience. Sometimes there is strong agreement, whereas at other times there can be great variation. The question is, how do we really know what the individuals are reporting both accurately and, if seemingly consistent with another's experience, to what degree is it consistent with another's experience? A good example would be somebody to say, if you do this guided meditation and this practice, you will have an experience of a particular spiritual entity. One individual may say they believe the spiritual entity is Michael the Archangel. However, another individual using the same methodology will say that the spirit entity is not Michael the Archangel, but a different angel or a different type of entity like an extraterrestrial. The question is, who is right, or maybe both are right. It's just that the individuals are uniquely different. Even though they use the same outward practice, the same inward experience may not occur. They may differ because of the individual's uniqueness and their unique perception. Then again, if they are told the guided meditation will give the individuals an experience of Michael the Archangel, both will probably report that is who they experience. So when it comes to non-physical phenomena, we don't have the kind of reliability that we can get on the physical phenomena. Here it needs to be noted, this is not about saying what is perceived by any individual is wrong. One cannot dispute the subjective experience of another. The question is how one's individual mind characterizes any experience the individual has based on what the individual has experienced in their life and what they think and believe. Based on what was personally observed and experienced in working with psychics to try and understand what and how they saw, there is no doubt that psychics, as any human, can see and perceive energy. However, how the energy is characterized is based on the individual's unique perception and what they think and believe about what they are perceiving. For every experience, there is an energy given rise to the experience we have through what we feel. The human mind will then characterize what we feel based on the experience we have had and the beliefs we hold. It is important to stay in what we feel, for being in the feeling allows us to be open to what we experience without mind biasing what we are experiencing. That is, feel the energy and not interpret it. In working with the psychics, it was observed how they interpreted what they say depends on their past experience and what they think and believe. It was observed if one took what the psychic said and then asked, what energy or what would the energy look like that gives rise to what they reported, one could see the accuracy of the psychic's beliefs. However, it became clear what they reported could be reported in other ways. Often what the psychics reported was ultimately inaccurate, but what they reported was a close approximation to what actually transpires or manifests. Here, it's important to realize, knowing that anything reported to us by any other has been biased by a human mind, but we can look to see if what we are hearing is resonating within us. That is, do we feel the connection with what is being reported, or is it hollow or even inaccurate words? There is a deep, profound awareness within each of us, and we know what is true for us or for our personal physical journey if we pay attention. Physical responses to non-physical experiences. When people say they perceive certain energies or have experiences of a non-physical energy being, we probably could connect their body to certain equipment and see if in fact there is a physiological change in their body as a result of what they perceive. This has been routinely done to meditators to observe the changes in their brain activity. There are real physiological and mental changes, but what they report as to what they are experiencing is through their unique subjective perception. Similarly, if an individual is having an emotional response to something, one can connect the equipment and determine that the person is actually having a physiological change to their emotional response. Again, even if there are physiological changes, what they report is their subjective perception. In general, when experienced phenomena are unseen and non-physical, it is very difficult for another to verify the description of their experience. Then, given the fact that everybody's perception is subjective, the question is, does the individual accurately communicate what they're experiencing? Or do they report what others have said or told them about their experience? Does the individual have the prior life experiences to properly characterize the experiences, or is it just a best approximation that can be given? Or the words they choose appear to be correct words to the individual having the experience, but a completely different meaning is understood by the listener because the words used have slightly different meanings for them. Any word or words used to describe any experience limits and bounds the experience within the frame of the words. That is, any word limits what is seeking to be described by the word. For example, consider the word father as to its meaning and how it is perceived in the context of various possibilities. The definition of father is the male parent of a child, but to suggest a good or bad father brings up a whole set of different implications about the word father that lie well outside the definition of the male parent of a child. But in any case, everything that is perceived is filtered through the human mind and through that subjective perception, which only knows the past the individual describing the experience has had. This brings up an interesting situation. We routinely rely on experiences individuals from the past have had, such as great teachers or information from individuals that have been learned, what others have experienced, and relay to them, who in turn relay the information to us. The question is, what is communicated and passed along correct, whether it is about a facet of creation or whatever to which the information refers? The issue is everything that is created by humans started as a single thought within the mind of an individual based on their unique subjective perceptions and communicated based on their past experiences. This means that everything that is passed down is an individual's perception. It does not matter what it is. What is passed down is another's perspective. The question is, how accurate is any individual's perception as to the accuracy relative to the truth of creation, and does the information resonate with our truth, and does it serve our truth? Routinely, what is seen is that someone does something, creates something, develops some unusual talent or ability. The individual is changed by their experience. The individual says they experience some type of blissful state, and they say they achieve this blissful state through the particular methodology or practices used. Others like the change they see in the individual. For whatever reason, other individuals want what this individual discovered, so they take the procedure or methodology and practice it. It appears to duplicate what the other has reportedly achieved. So the belief is the method works, and those who practice the methodology, they are having the same experience. But again, each has a unique perspective. So we may not be having the same experience in what each person is interpreting, may not be correct for the person who has the experience. In any case, others use that methodology. Those who use the methodology obtain some kind of state that they too say is blissful or in alignment with their understanding of bliss. But we do not know if the same bliss is experienced by both. Consequently, individuals believe both the practice and methodology to be something special since they appear to create such a blissful state. Then often the existence of the created state is either extrapolated to exist outside the created state, or the practice and methodology are somehow special as a result of the state created. In reality, it is only a created state. Consider any talent developed by a human with sufficient practice. We can become quite good at any task and perform well above the average individual. But what is developed is not special. It is only a selected creative state. So too many spiritual traditions and practices. They are selected created states and don't necessarily expand into something deeper and broader. But if the individual believes the practice is special and their belief is met, the individual is satisfied. But in many ways, any result from a practice or methodology are only a created state based upon the procedure that is used. That does not mean the interpretation of the results is a correct description of creation, or that is the way creation exists outside the perception of that methodology. So one problem we have for anything which is passed down or from the past is we cannot go back in time to the individual who had the experience, who really knows what they experienced, and to know if what has been translated and passed down over time is an accurate representation or description of what they experienced. In any case, the conclusions they have is based upon their subjective mind, which again is their interpretation. The question is, what is reported about the experience accurate? Again, the individual in the past is interpreting the initial experience through their limited subjective mind. The individual explains their experience the best they can based upon their experience they have had up to that time. In any case, the conclusion they have is based upon their subjective mind, which causes us to look carefully and see if what they're saying resonates with us, or are we just accepting what they say because their explanation and answer is better than anything that we in our mind has come up with, or we accept what they said because the individual of the experience is reported as a teacher of exceptional abilities. Anything created by humans starts as a single thought in a subjective human mind. That in turn means that everything that is carried forward that we rely upon other than those physical phenomena that we can go back and do experiments to verify the accuracy of what was perceived is based upon somebody's perception. Often we cannot go back and verify what they saw or how they saw it or what they did that allows them to draw the conclusions that they have. In any case, the conclusions they have is based upon their subjective mind, which causes us to look carefully. We need to look and see if what they're saying resonates with us, or are we just accepting what they say because their explanation and answer is better than anything that we in our mind has come up with. For unseen phenomena, which many would call mystical or spiritual phenomena, something similar is done as with the physical phenomena. The physical phenomena as experiments built upon experiments which built upon experiments. As experiments expand and become more broadening, one looks for an interpretation to explain the phenomena that encompasses all the observed experiments. In the unseen realm, everything started with an experience of some subjective perception. It is reported or observed, and usually there is an accompanying technique or understanding that people have found beneficial. So they believe that the interpretation provided by the individual is correct, and then other individuals take that interpretation and build on it. Others have their experience, and they expand upon that original interpretation to encompass their experiences and give a little broader understanding. Over time, you have all the different evolutions of spiritual traditions that grow and become formalized. Many of them turn into religion. Some of them just remain simple practices that some people try and follow. And then there are some traditions which don't look to go beyond the simple practices as such, because the simple practices provide a level of satisfaction about life. But the issue here is that they all go back to an individual's interpretation of an experience that they had. That doesn't mean that is the way the universe works. It's not what anybody else will necessarily experience, but there's enough commonalities in what we experience that we jump onto somebody who gives us an explanation that seems to make sense. Here is where the problem is. It is because we each are a unique subjective perception of creation. We each are very unique and we have a very unique perception. Unless we live and learn to develop our own unique perception as to what it means to live in the world and dance with the world, remaining in our uniqueness, but at the same time providing the world what it asks of us, our gifts that we have will be lost and not come forth. This is the challenge. It is to learn to live our unique perception, taking from what others tell us and keeping what serves us and what resonates with us, and allow us to step in and develop our own unique, authentic self. From the understanding and the journey of exploration into our creativity and my perception of the findings, we each have an internal compass that we can use to follow and track our uniqueness and live our uniqueness. We each have a relationship with the creative essence of creation that we can experience as a presence within us and can guide us and lead us through life. We each have a creative passion, something that we are here to create, which we feel strongly about. The energy pulls us or pushes us to create it, but a lot of it centers on learning to navigate from the heart. That is, center on what the heart wants to create in this life, and then have our mind figure out how to do it. Overall summary and conclusion. In reviewing and contemplating the discussion provided in this recording, you may find yourself coming to see an overall conclusion which can be made about creation. That is, the world is what you think it is. This means our beliefs, expectations, attitudes, desires, fears, judgments, feelings, consistent or persistent thoughts and actions give rise to and create our own unique perception of creation. This then leads us to choose how we will experience creation. The recommendation made here is to choose your beliefs which serve and resonate with your truth, and empower yourself to live your truth and engage the world.